On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Austin Booker no longer with KU? Question mark. We discuss into that what it would mean if he is gone from KU and a, I guess, quote unquote update, so to speak, on the depth chart for KU ahead of the Guaranteed Rate Bowl with UNLV.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can also find our show on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the action. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, talking a little KU football. It seems like Austin Booker maybe no longer with the team for KU football, so we're going to discuss what that would mean, the possible news there, what it would mean for the KU defensive end position and the defense in 2024 and for the bowl game against UNLV in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Plus, KU football sort of updated the depth chart a little bit ahead of their Guaranteed Rate Bowl game with UNLV on Tuesday. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So I guess the first things first here, technically on this 2 deep, which tying these two things together, Austin Booker is listed on the 2 deep. Now, we've talked about this before. When you look at the KU depth chart, there are a lot of positions where it's listed as an or. And typically, in pretty much every case, the guy who is on top of the other one with the or is actually ahead of that guy on the depth chart. So Hayden Hatcher, even though he's listed as an or with Austin Booker, Hatcher is ahead of Austin Booker there, which tells you he would probably start. The rumor has kind of been that Austin Booker, who is a 6'6", 245-pound defensive end who leads KU in sacks, just a redshirt sophomore, is opting out of the bowl game and did not travel with the team. The not traveling part, pretty indicative, if that is the case, that he would not be back at Kansas, right? I mean, you can opt out of the bowl game, travel with the team. Maybe you're just going to the NFL. You can opt out of the bowl game and not travel with the team because you're, again, just convinced on going to the NFL and it doesn't matter. But I guess there's a possibility at this point is what's unclear is if he's going to go to the NFL or transfer because – I think from an NFL draft perspective, he's certainly somebody who would get drafted, but I do think another year of tape, another year where he could add a little bit more weight to his frame would go a long ways to him being like a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick. But maybe this year, maybe he is more being seen as a 4th, 5th, 6th round draft pick, something like that. So maybe he does enter the NFL draft, but I think the fact that he's not traveling with the team would be indicative that it's not a decision of, okay, maybe I go to the draft, maybe I come back to KU. It's a decision of either the NFL draft or I'm transferring from the program. And I'd imagine Gage Keys, who is basically, I don't know, from what we've heard, he's like Austin Booker's one of his really good friends. And obviously the two of them were at Minnesota together, transferred from Minnesota to Kansas together. And when Gage Keys transfers away, well, you have a friend transferring to another program, but also the money rumors have been rampant about Gage Keys. I mean, numbers that have been tossed around have been over $200,000 for Gage Keys. I don't know if that's the case or not. Sometimes the NIL, back channel stuff is who knows what is actually real and what's tangible and what's not. But the idea has been that it's over $200K for Gage Keys, which for a rotational defensive lineman from KU would be a lot of money for Auburn to spend on something like that. And so if you're Austin Booker and you see your good friend getting paid, again, hypothetically, $250,000 or something, you're probably sitting there going, okay, well, Gage Keys didn't have any sacks this year. I had 8 of them. What am I worth? Am I worth $2 million? Am I worth $1 million? I want to go test it on the open market. So I do think from that standpoint, it does make it a little bit hard. We'll see what he ends up deciding. But if that is true, that he has not traveled with the team, which based on the team landing today and, everything that's going on, it seems like that probably is the case. Why would he still be listed on the 2 deep? Well, we'll get into this later, but KU doesn't really update the 2 deep that much. And also I think there's a bit of a competitive advantage thing. There were weeks where Jalen Daniels was listed as an or as a starter, and he never had a shot of playing with, Jason Bean or something like that. They're just probably trying to make it so that UNLV has to still prepare for the thought of Austin Booker because of what he can provide on that end of the floor. So the one thing I don't really totally understand is the money stuff, though, because, and this is just me speaking personally, I understand it for Gage Keys. If Gage Keys truly was offered, over $200K to go to Auburn, and he's a rotational defensive tackle right now at Kansas, you look at the NFL draft stock of Gage Keys, there's not really NFL draft stock at the moment. So for Gage Keys, you might not have an NFL future. Go take the $250K, take care of your family, take care of your future. I understand that. For Austin Booker, it's a little tougher because it's like, okay, I don't know how much KU would offer him to stay versus if he went to another school, but it almost seems short-sighted because at the other end of the rainbow, so to speak, is that pot of gold, which is the NFL, which is like, does it matter if you make $300K in college this last year versus $500K somewhere else? Because there's a chance that if you stick around in the current environment you're in, you could turn yourself into a day 1 or day 2 pick and make millions of dollars. So I don't totally understand that, but either way, you wish him the best. And he is an unbelievable talent with a phenomenal speed rush. He had an excellent season, 56 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, probably a better pass rusher than a run defender, but still, all around great player, 2 forced fumbles, countless big time plays. Think of all the big time moments that he had, a sack or got pressures on a quarterback that, forced a big stop for KU in a key moment of the game. He was just a one-man wrecking crew as a defensive lineman with pass rush ability. And he actually ended up ranking number 1 in the entire Big 12 on Pro Football Focus for highest graded edge players across the conference. So, unbelievable season by him, unbelievable pickup for KU, getting him from the transfer portal this last year from Minnesota. You might be wondering, well, how can he transfer again? I guess he could graduate. I don't think he's supposed to graduate, just a redshirt sophomore, so it would just be year 3. I think it's more about there's this new rule that has been passed into legislation that allows players to transfer basically as much as they want, which I sort of understand from the freedom of movement, but it creates absolute chaos, and I think certainly makes college athletic side of things even more of the wild west, so to speak. But obviously this would be a huge loss for KU. If you want a glass half full perspective, they've had to replace their top pass rusher every single year so far, right? You look at year 1, they had Kyron Johnson, who ends up getting picked in the 6th round of the NFL draft by the Eagles. And it was like, okay, who's going to replace him? They had Lonnie Phelps from the transfer portal. Lonnie Phelps was probably even better than Kyron Johnson was. He doesn't end up getting drafted, goes earlier than they thought he would. They thought they'd have another year there. And then it's like, oh man, how are they going to replace Lonnie Phelps? And they bring in Austin Booker and they develop him as a kid who wasn't really playing at Minnesota and turn him into, this absolute stud, all Big 12 first team defensive end. So I mean, eventually that's going to stop. You're not going to continue to lose players and get better and better every single time. Eventually there is going to be kind of a reset there, but this staff has shown the affinity or the ability, to overcome that and find the next guy up, which is so important for the future of a program. They've been able to do that. That's the glass half full. There are ways that your defense can get better. Will it be better? What will the defensive end position get to? We'll get to that in a moment. As far as how this affects the bowl game for KU, obviously it's a big loss, right? Austin Booker arguably is your most valuable defender. He's certainly in the conversation because you have some other good defensive players up there with like Kobe Bryant, Melo Dotson, and some of the safeties and everything. But he's certainly, because pass rush is just so valuable inherently in football, probably your most valuable player when you combine how good he is and how valuable just that defensive end spot is. So to not have him against a UNLV quarterback in Jaden Maeva, who was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year, and a really unique offense, and now you're asking guys to play more a bit at this stage of the season will certainly hurt. It means more playing time for Hayden Hatcher and Patrick Joyner, and maybe even some of the guys who haven't played as much leading into this, like a Davion Westmoreland or a Dean Miller or a Dylan Brooks. Like maybe Dylan Brooks can be the next Austin Booker, a guy who's a former highly recruited guy with a good frame, and maybe he can start turning into that, and maybe it gives more opportunity for somebody like that to become that guy for KU. But in its own, this would obviously be a huge loss if it certainly is true that he would no longer be with the team. Let's get to what it means for the defensive end group and the KU defense in 2024 with this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite sporting event should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, theater events, whatever you're looking to go to near you. They have flash deals and last-minute tickets, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. You get images of the seats from the app. They have their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. And the game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so again, if Austin Booker truly is no longer with KU football, how does that affect the defensive end group and the defense as a whole in 2024? Then we'll get to the rest of the depth chart stuff ahead of the guaranteed rate poll for KU. If you're looking for basketball content, we had a KU Yale recap late last night, so you can check that out here anywhere you get your podcasts with Locked On Jayhawks. So I guess this is a good thing that you got Dylan Woodkey from Youngstown State, who's a good defensive end coming up from the FCS level, because that helps, mitigate this loss a little bit. Woodkey more of a, I think, run-stopping defensive end, but he does have some pass rush to him, so that'll certainly help. Maybe that's the path here. Maybe for KU, and they were better this year against the run than they were the year before, but there's still room to improve. Maybe the level of improvement, if you're looking at the defense as a whole, if the defensive line can be better against the run, but you lose some in pass rush, do those things equal it out that you can still have that same kind of level of play here? You definitely need to get Jeremy Robinson back now for sure. He can have another year if he wants it. He can start a professional career. He can transfer. I don't know. It's impossible to tell with anybody at this point in time, right? But certainly it would be big time if they could get Jeremy Robinson back, who had a strong season this year, but was a bit overshadowed by what Austin Booker did. Obviously, they're going to continue to scour the transfer portal for probably another defensive end now. Elijah Alston, I saw, picked up an offer. He is from Marshall. He had like over a 90 Pro Football Focus grade, so that would be an excellent get, but I'd imagine the line is going to be out the door for Alston and the teams that could possibly get him. Do we see the young freshman now get any playing time? Like, does Deshaun Warner or Dak Brinkley's going to be joining at mid-semester here? Do we see either one of those, if not both, play in at least a rotational role? I mean, theoretically, if you can play both 4 games, if you still want to redshirt them, you could say the combination of Warner and Brinkley is going to give you 8 games played. You just space them out and say, these 4 for you, these 4 for you, whenever those come over the course of the season, maybe alternate weeks, maybe pick first 4, last, whatever it is. And you have an extra rotational rusher between one of the two that just comes in on passing downs. I don't know. Maybe that's an option. Definitely puts more stress on guys who are backups or rotational players like, does Davion Westmoreland, does Dylan Brooks, does Dean Miller, guys who at one point had high potential for you. Can that come together in a big way this next season? The thing that sucks most is if Booker was back, this defensive end unit would be one of the best defensive end units in the entire conference. Without him, it can range in a lot of ways. It just depends on who else comes back, on player improvement, on what the freshmen can provide, on if you can add anybody else in the portal, right? There's just a lot more moving parts. Still, though, I do think that if you can bring back Robinson, a base of Robinson, Woodkey, some of those guys like Westmoreland, Brooks, Miller, maybe one of them can break out this year, Brinkley and Warner, and you add one more in the portal, I still think that can at least be a solid unit for you overall. As far as what this means for the defense, though, is it possible for the defense to be better next year without Austin Booker? Because I remember in the offseason last year when you lost Lonnie Phelps, I remember having an episode here on Locked On Jayhawks being like, it's hard to see how much better can they be without Lonnie Phelps, because Lonnie Phelps was arguably their best defender. Maybe it was Kobe Bryant, but again, going back to the value discussion of how important pass rush is, you would argue that, right? And at the very least, he's in the conversation. And it was like, yes, but it's just going to take everything else improving. Well, the good news for KU is that everything else did improve, and they got similar, if not better, production from Austin Booker. So the first question becomes, will somebody break out to give you similar, if not better production than Austin Booker? Chances are probably not, but could you get similar? I don't know. Based on what this staff has been able to do the last couple of years, it is entirely possible. We talked about the PFF grades in Big 12. There was a lot of room to improve for this defensive tackle group. Obviously, you lose Gage Keys, you lose Devin Phillips. So that hurts, but they're scouring the portal for D tackles. I think Tommy Dunn and DJ Withers, this was their first year starting. They should probably take a big step up next season. Maybe that's an area that gets a lot better. Maybe linebackers, J.B. Brown in another year. Maybe Logan Brantley starts to work into his own. Maybe you can add a transfer at the linebacker position. Maybe Tywan Berryhill takes a big step up. Linebackers can take another big step up. So if the D tackles take a step up and the linebackers take a step up, if the DBs are the same, if not better, by having a lot of continuity, and the depth overall of D end is better, then the defense still can or will be better. So I think that you look at it, this certainly lowers your ceiling, because I think if you had Austin Booker back, you would feel like you had the chance to be one of the, top 5 defenses in the Big 12. Maybe now you're looking more like, okay, can you just be middle of the pack next year, which is where you kind of were this year? And then maybe the offense takes another step forward, because by a couple things, like I think mainly because the red zone offense struggled a bit and because you had quarterback injuries. The offense was still really good this year, but last year it was number 2 in the Big 12. This year it was more to that 3 to 5 range, depending where you're looking. Maybe you can take that step up back to being 1 or 2, have this year's defense. Maybe that's enough to, win 9 or 10 games. I mean, they were close to winning 9, 10, 11 games this year, as is with everything. So I think you can still have enough defensively. It'll be another year in the system and the scheme. Obviously, everything waits to figure out who you're adding. But I think what we've learned with Lance Leipold and this staff and this team, you're more than one player. You are more than one player, and you have to have trust in the staff and the scheme and the current players that are there to get it done. And so far, they've shown nothing to show that it would be the opposite. So huge loss, and would certainly hurt for KU and would also hurt against UNLV, but not one that is impossible to overcome, because as a college football program, you're going to lose players to the portal. You're going to lose players to the NFL draft, especially as you get better and better. You have to be able to churn. You have to be able to overcome that. Look at KU basketball, right? How many years do you lose your All-American? And the next year you have a new one. You have to be able to fill and replace. And so far, Lance Leipold and KU have done just that. Let's get on to maybe notable other listings or changes on the depth chart for KU ahead of the Guaranteed Rate Bowl with UNLV. This episode of Locked on Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. You can get KU double-digit favorite against UNLV, even without Austin Booker. I don't know. Maybe without Austin Booker, you're like, I don't know. It looks like they could have some offensive linemen out too. Maybe I'm going on UNLV. I don't know. So again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, finishing things up here with Locked on Jayhawks, changes or notable things about the depth chart headed into the Guaranteed Rate Bowl against UNLV. And we will have a KU UNLV specific preview coming at you Tuesday morning to get you ready for that game. So be on the lookout for that. If you're looking for the Yale content, you can check that out last night. This is more of just kind of an extra episode giving you updates. And I don't know, maybe you're driving somewhere and maybe this is an extra 20 minutes that you killed in the car. Anyway, notable changes or listings on the offensive side of the ball. Armaj Reed-Adams is now listed as the starting right tackle with an or on Bryce Cabledew. But going back to the idea that usually the guy on top is the one who actually starts, he's listed on top of Cabledew, who's been your starter at right tackle. I think it's safe to say Reed-Adams is going to be starting at right tackle. We've seen him mostly play guard, but he has played some tackle. I think the idea there is with Cabledew, he's injured, I believe, right now. So maybe they're holding out hope that he can play, but I believe the thought is he would be out. Now, if he is out, the guy listed as the backup behind him at right tackle with Reed-Adams starting would be James Livingston. And then you look at the rest of the offensive line, still some interesting stuff. We talked earlier in the week that Pooney is supposedly opting out of the bowl game. He's still listed as the starting left tackle. Again, though, I think that's more procedural than anything else. I'm still assuming he's opting out, and the backup listed there is Calvin Clements. So I think the idea is Clements at left tackle. Michael Ford is your starting left guard. Your starting center, still Mike Nowitzki, starting right guard, Kobe Baines, starting right tackle, Armaj Reed-Adams. And then off the bench, you have James Livingston as a backup tackle. You have Spencer Lavelle, Nolan Gorchika as backup guards, and Dre Dorian as the backup center. Keaton Kubeka is now the backup X with LJ Arnold. Tanaka Scott obviously gone into the portal. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe we see a target for Keaton Kubeka in this game. Obviously, this doesn't count against his red shirt, so I think that would be cool if that can certainly happen. And then this isn't really a change, but Jalen Daniels is listed as QB3, so I've kind of wondered if, Jason Bean starts the game and plays a majority. Do we see Jalen Daniels for a drive or two, maybe in the second half, especially if you're winning the game? Maybe that discounts it by him being QB3. As far as the defense side of the ball, obviously with Gage Keys gone, you had some shifting around. Caleb Taylor and Keenan Caldwell are both on the 2 deep without Gage Keys. I mentioned with the Austin Booker thing, Hayden Hatcher had the or and was listed above him. So I think Hayden Hatcher will get the fill-in start for him, which I will say that is kind of cool that Hayden Hatcher gets to start his last game at KU, because he is somebody who has embodied the program and worked so hard to get to a point of where he's at. So I think in the same way that it's really cool for Jason Bean and fitting for him to start this bowl game and have an opportunity to go out on top, same kind of thing for Hayden Hatcher here. And then Joyner becomes the backup at the one defensive end spot. Dylan Brooks is the other, which is a real opportunity for him to start, jumping to the bit. One that I found interesting, kind of weird. I don't remember this happening over the course of the season. Mello Dotson listed as an or with Quentin Lassiter. Is that indicative? Is Mello dealing with some sort of injury? We thought Mello Dotson was coming back. Is that changed now? I'm assuming it's not, but I don't know. Is it just some weird thing? You just have a senior listed as an or in there? I don't know. Just kind of interesting there. Now, as far as some UNLV news, I did want to throw this in here. They have a defensive end, Xavier Carter, who entered the portal. He was actually their highest rated defensive player by Pro Football Focus, 82.2 score, but he only played 157 snaps. So, over 13 games for them, that's like 12, 13 snaps a game. So he wasn't really playing that much, but good player in the limited time. They do have a bunch of DBs. They have a backup receiver. They have a 4th string running back in the portal. Most notable of which, they have a safety who committed to Baylor. But besides him, it's mostly backups. So it certainly seems like between injury and opt-outs, KU going to have more to deal with coming into this game than UNLV will. That'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also like and subscribe to us on our YouTube page. We'll be back with you Tuesday to help you preview the KU UNLV game. Have a great rest of your day. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.